All right. Hey. Okay. Good. Did it work out?
I think we're okay. So it's actually a little
Okay.
easier than I thought it was going to be. And yeah, I'm
All
a
right.
little bit of
Sweet.
a Zoom novice, so I'm trying to
Oh,
expand.
that's okay. I've never done the cloud thing, recording on a cloud thing, so
Yeah,
I wouldn't know that. But I'm sure Zoom seems to be pretty easy to figure out.
yeah. That's actually was easier than I thought it was going to be. So I think in my head it was going to be more complicated. Um,
Cool. Thanks for setting it up. And I was able to move my chair so I have more like Terrence Malick
yeah,
light on me, you know. But yeah.
yeah.
So how are you?
I'm good. Today was a little bit of an adventure just with work. So it's actually nice to get out of that headspace and talk about something different. So maybe I think some of the things we spoke about last time are kind of tied up in the prompt that they've given us, which were to speak a little bit about our practices and how we typically work independently, and then we can also talk about collaboration, which maybe we didn't get into as much
Hmm.
last time. So yeah, I'm curious about your process. It's still really inspiring to me because, as I said, I really respond to the intimacy that you have with your subjects and how much of a sense of the place that we get to, and I like that a lot in the kinds of films that I create, and I like that in your photos. So I'm curious about how you get that get to that place in your work.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been interested in kind of being the outsider wherever I go. Yeah, most of my work is sort of deals with going into mostly like kind of small towns. So I like to travel around US, the people that I met in small towns. And and yeah, it's and I try to kind of tie that into where I'm from Estonia. And I also kind of photograph in that manner in Estonia and in America. So I oftentimes actually seek out similar symbols in both places, because most of my work deals with dealing with this idea of trauma, like whether it's some kind of like a trauma that the landscape has endured or trauma that the people are trying to kind of recover from. And so yeah, in both places, in Estonia and in the south, I kind of try to find commonalities, without trying to be like strictly documentary. Yeah, I sort of instigate or I provoke a lot of situations, or I even stage a lot of situations, and I portray it as if I found it. Yeah, I just love kind of pushing this medium of documentary photography as well. I used to also photograph people who were kind of wanted to exhibit themselves in some way. So before the Estonia slash American South project, which is called East Southeast. Yeah, very collaborative. I couldn't have done it without people letting me into their homes, and whether it was just photographing a tree in somebody's yard or a portrait, still, like, I really that project was carried on by trust of people I met. And then the project before was very much about um, fabricating intimacy between me and my subjects, and that project was called "And the Fruit." And I would find people who wanted to be in front of the camera, and I'm sure it's not just like, it doesn't just fall on my lap. I'm sure I kind of, again, I might invite a certain kind of subject, as well. And I'm sure I'm as foreign and exotic to them as they are to me. And so there is this kind of like push and pull. And I love that. I love the fact that I have to feel uncomfortable and challenged as well, that I'm not just like going in with an idea and taking advantage of people and being like, okay, I know what you're gonna do, I know what I want. Like, I am totally kind of clueless when I go into these situations. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the joy of like discovery, and that's kind of how maybe the two big projects past 10 years have formed. I hope that kind of answered the question.
I could probably ask you a million questions just based on
A
what you
follow-up. Yeah.
just said, because there's
Well, can I ask you a question?
yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Seeing a clip of your new film, seeing a brief clip about it, your work really thrives on, finding these super candid moments and kind of going into the small community, and becoming kind of like the fly on the wall, and how, like, what is the kind of ecosystem that needs to happen for you to get those shots, that, like, what is the formula for you that makes that kind of look happen, or that feeling happen for you?
Well, that's a really good question, and it's at the center of so much of what I think about in filmmaking. And for me, it kind of comes back to the concept of improvisation. For the filmmaker, when you approach, if you aspire to have a kind of a spontaneous feeling in the film, you're grappling with the fact that nothing about the filmmaking process really can be spontaneous, because it is such a production where you have to close down the street and 30 people have to show up and you have to put up the lights. It's all of these very practical things. So as you said, yeah, there are these kind of recipes for how to get there. And I think that there's a bit of a range in the kind of the improvisational material in the film that I just did in Malta. And the film being about a community of fishermen and set in this very visually interesting world, starring non-actors. We had to kind of create an ecosystem, to use your word, that actually was conducive to unexpected things happening, but it also get us on the right path to tell the story that we set out to tell. So sometimes it comes down to very simple techniques. For me, one of the main ones was not to show the script to the actors. I should call them non-actors. You start with the script and you try to make the script as truthful as possible. So I got to know the cast very well over the course of a couple of years, and I was able to write it close to their real lives. I kind of knew how they're, what their families were like, what a typical day is like, how where they live, what their hobbies are. And so the scenes could present themselves to me quite easily. And then my job was to kind of try to inject the drama into it. And in that way, you have a script that is truthful. And because it's truthful, you actually don't need to show it to the actor. You can just say, oh, remember that time that you and I went to the fish market together during our research period? Let's kind of do that again.
Good.
And
yeah.
If you show them the script, then they start reading it and they start getting into their own heads, and they're like, oh, I have to do it like Alex said. And it kills the film every time. So you plan very much ahead in order to kind of throw the script out the window and to be able to improvise and to capture that sense of life. And that's maybe one technique. And then when you're really lucky, but this happens much less frequently, things can just happen on the day that are just kind of gifts, miracles, and the camera happens to be on, and you capture it, and you're just so thankful for that, and you just try as hard as you can to hold on to it and get it into the film. And then to speak of collaboration, when you have a crew who can work together very well, you can convert those sudden opportunities into a real scene. And it's like, how quickly can you get over yourself? How quickly can you get over the script? And those are the days where you feel good and you go home and you feel like you earned your keep, because rather than just going and shooting the pages that you planned, you reacted, and you kept the thing alive, and you held on to what you wanted to do, but you made it better because the world offered you something you didn't even intend.
It's interesting that you I mean, I guess I don't know if it's like an approach that filmmakers can have, that you go into the community first and you get to know the people. And I love that you actually built the script based on your experience with the fishermen. And I'm sure like there was like probably slang that you didn't know about, and you kind of. I have another question. Like how, I know we spoke briefly, but how has this pandemic affected your work?
Well, it has shifted the timeline just on a nuts and bolts level. It's a little uncertain exactly when we get to finish it and premiere it. Um, the original plan was for it to actually be ready about right now in August of 2020. Um, but, you know, the film industry kind of all over the world was offended by this. We're very lucky that the film was shot and, you know, we weren't,
Oh yeah.
wasn't shut
Mm-hmm.
down, but it
Mm-hmm.
did pose a big question to us about how to get it out into the world. And, you know, we faced some tough questions about uh, releasing it in a very uncertain environment. Are people ready to go to theaters? When you work on something this hard, you want to give it the best shot. And so we've delayed our premiere until next year. Exactly when we
Okay.
don't know, and so there's a lot of uncertainty around that. But you know, we were kind of lifted up by our excitement about the film, and we think that you know it's enough of a kind of a timeless story that coming out this year or next doesn't make kind of a big difference to the enjoyment of it. So you know, when people are ready to be back into theaters and when things like film festivals are back in action, you know, this will be that'll be a better place for the film
Yeah.
to come into.
Yeah,
And
I know. I can't imagine.
yourself
Mhm.
about the pandemic and
Before the protests, like things kind of calmed down, that there was really like no place to go. You couldn't like hang out with anybody. There wasn't this kind of feeling that I was missing out of if I didn't go to some opening, or if I wasn't like hanging out with people. And so I kind of like that I was just had to stay in my studio, um, you know, edit work, because I work, maybe we work in a similar manner, that we go out in a world, we make our work outside, and then we come back to the studio, or we come back and edit and, you know, archive things on our hard drives and stuff like that. So I was able to kind of work on, you know, find new threads in my work, because I would have like just kind of collections of pictures that are very random, but then I'm like, oh, wait a second, I've been photographing a lot of, you know, adolescent girls, or I've been photographing a lot of cement or rocks or things like that. And then I'm like, I will see like a little thread in my work, and I was kind of able to do that kind of sort of spy work. But I think that was, I was only able to do that because I had this kind of time to think, really, like
yeah,
because I often just like very frantically just work on a project or work on something, and then I don't really have time to sit down and kind of evaluate what I've made. And so yeah.
yeah, that's yeah. Again, I see some similarities in the process that where our works kind of the the work that we're involved in, you kind of touch each other, and that going back to your studio and looking at what you've done and kind of like the editing informing the writing in a way. So you're kind of picking out, finding threads, and then helping inspire what you go out to look for next. This sort of this
Yeah.
circular kind of process. It's not always like you know exactly, and you just go out and you do it, and then you're done. Sometimes there's a feedback loop, um, and I certainly feel that way. And it's for me, I often feel like how quickly can I kind of like get the clay in my hands, because it's only until you're
Mm-hmm.
working with it do you
Mm-hmm.
start to see what it can be, and then you have to put it down and pick it back up.